Hey guys, this is game 3 uh, of Anand Carlsen World Championship match. I'm Calm, with me is Fusion. He's having an immediate internet connection problem on Skype. This bodes well. Oh no, he's just gone offline. Um, he's gone forward a move though, and as you can see it's knight f3. So yeah, so knight f3 is probably going to be another reti. This is what Carlsen played in the first game. Last time Anand played d5 and g6, some system like that. And Matt is back, I think.
Sup?
Okay. So this is going well. Okay, so we saw knight f3 again, so it's likely to be another reti. Your thoughts?
What?
Insightful. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I guess that's what he's prepared, the reti. But I didn't think he really got anything in the first game with it.
Yeah, I don't know if we can do this commentary.
What? Why?
Out here.
You can't hear me?
Let's go. No,
Yeah.
it keeps breaking up.
Oh.
Makes it. Okay, it's going.
Okay. Is it going to be better later on?
I don't know. Let's carry on anyway. Knight f3.
Okay, it's knight f3. It's going to be a
What a,
reti.
what a dubious move. Someone played that against me last night. Wow. You'll find out about that later.
Yeah, we've got a special LMB queued up for that game.
Yep. Okay, so how did Vishy deal with this? D5. So and then it's kind of similar to last time, except move 3, c4. Take it away.
Yeah, okay, so last time Magnus just played bishop g2 and we just got like a normal reti where he played a d4 later after bishop g7, and the idea of that is just to like get central control. This is more of an attacking line, I think, because you're immediately challenging the d5 pawn, so you're trying to get rid of the opposition pawns along that long diagonal that you're going to put your bishop on g2. So I think this is a better line. I think this is more attacking. And I guess Magnus feels the same. He feels that he couldn't really repeat the previous version, so he's playing something else because he wants to get more out of it, I think.
Yep, sounds like a good plan for him anyway. And Vishy just takes it. Doesn't want that pawn to be attacked. Best way of dealing with it.
There's a few ways you can deal with it. It's like the Queen's Gambit. You can play the Queen's Gambit accepted, which is kind of like this is, and it's fine. Or you can play e6 or c6 to kind of support it, which would be the same thing here. But I feel like in this line, compared to the Queen's Gambit, it makes more sense to take immediately because you've already played g6 and you can develop relatively quickly. And I think normally to get back this pawn, you're going to play something along the lines of Queen a4 check in this position, and then pick it up on c4. So that's kind of 2 extra queen moves, and you can also help yourself develop in that way by putting something in the way, either something on d7 or knight c6 like we see in the game.
Doesn't need to take back straight away.
No, because if black was to play anything like bishop e6 or anything, knight g5 is very annoying. Knight e5 even, because then you've got 3 pieces attacking the piece on c6, which is pinned, which actually looks very bad. So it's yeah, it's not a priority to take it, but likewise, Anand's not gonna try and spend too much time trying to save it either. He kind of considers it gone already, so he's just gonna develop.
Yeah, fair enough. So here we go with the Piancasso. Knight c3, then e5. Strikes out in the middle.
Yeah, so I would take on c4 now, because I don't want him to play bishop e6, which is like a normal developing move, because he'd then, be able to support c4. So I can't remember if that's what Magnus does immediately, but now is the kind of right time to take it. We've developed other pieces that we can. to develop our c1 bishop, we're going to want to play d3 or something to let it out. So we want to get rid of that c4 pawn first, so we can do it without it being taken.
Good. So Vichy carries on developing.
Yeah,
puts on e7.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Looks fine to me.
Yeah, I mean, the other option is f6, but then
you can play f5 later this way.
Exactly, and also you don't block your g7 bishops. So things like knight d4 might be more of an option later because you've got something else protecting it. So yeah, I just think it's overall slightly better. We've already got a half-open d file by having no pawn on the d file and him having the d2 pawn. So we may want to keep our queen on that file anyway to just like triple up with the rooks and stuff. So queen e7 is unlikely to be played, which means knight e7 gets that much better. It also helps support c6, which is obviously the diagonal that Magnus is going to focus on.
All seems sensible so far. And then we get castling, so just carrying on. d3 to open up this white bishop on the dark squares. I guess that's fine, have to do it somehow. And also keeps an eye on e4, I imagine.
Yeah, I think this position's pretty much equal, but I think this is a much better version of equal for Magnus compared to the last game, where he was white, just because there's no real way for black to force a draw in this position, via repetition or otherwise. So we're going to get a longer fight, which is good.
Yeah, pretty deserved one after the last two games. Yeah. Pretty shocking. So h6 seems kind of preemptive.
Yeah, I think it's because he wants to... Well, I mean, in a lot of these lines you want to put your king on h7 and push f5, so it's kind of like a King's Indian defense kind of plan. It also prevents anything from coming to g5, which could be annoying. Probably the bishop, given he's just played d3, so it's just a kind of way to prevent that. Of course, you can't move his f-pawn yet because of the queen. If he plays bishop e6 first or something like queen b5, just attacking the b7 pawn is, it's just some move, and this is just kind of preventative and a wait for a move, I think.
Yeah. Okay, good. Bishop d2. Is that the best place for the bishop? I guess hasn't got many options now that h6 has been played.
Yeah, I mean, to me, more obvious is bishop e3, but I imagine there's some reason why he didn't go for that. Maybe it's just that he doesn't like the immediate knight d4 or something, just kind of blocking it. Or maybe knight f5, attacks the bishop, and after bishop c5, just rook e8, it's not really going anywhere. I mean, I guess the idea is that... Well, the thing is, I wouldn't say b4 or a5 are particularly good squares for it either. Maybe he's looking to bring it to c3 after his knight moves. That could be a good square, but... Yeah, I'm not particularly sure of the justification of that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Bit of background. Don't know how much you can hear. I've got headphones on, so
a little bit.
I can't really hear background noise.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Just all adds to the LNB experience. Am I right?
Yeah.
And 94 being played anyway.
Okay, so maybe Magnus saw this coming, and given that, like if he assumes this move is to be played, then bishop d2 can make more sense because we can put it on b4, which is a pretty good square, and it can't be taken by the knight. So that could be some justification.
Okay.
From Anand's side, I think it's just a good idea to get something, more central control there.
I guess he couldn't take it up if the bishop was on e3. Am I right in saying that, or am I wrong? I can't really count that many times because otherwise it forks them.
Well, he could have taken on d4, but not with the knight, because obviously, if the bishop was on e3, he'd taken out, it would fork. So maybe it's just a case that, he wanted to take with the knight and not trade off the bishop, because he didn't want to leave that strong knight there. On the other hand, for Vichy, it's He's going to take with the e-pawn now, I'd expect, and that means e2 can be pretty weak. Because he's played the move d3, the d-pawn is not really going to be a weakness at any point anymore, like I was talking earlier about the half-open d-file, but instead this e2 pawn is going to be kind of awkward to deal with, because if he ever pushes the e-pawn forwards, black's just going to be able to take it, and then d3 becomes really weak because no pawn can support it.
Yep, so that's the problem with playing these crazy side openings. You need to get out there with e4, and then e2 can never be a weakness.
That is true.
So he takes it, and here we go. Obviously, move the knight out of the way.
Yeah.
Which is a nice, natural position for it to go to.
I mean, I guess the other option is like knight d5 or knight b5 or something, but I think on b5 you could just play c6, and then the knight kind of gets stuck in a3 for a bit. And if you go to d5, you're kind of encouraging a lot of trades, which I would imagine that Vishy's just going to take, because he'll be quite happy with another draw as black. This also can come to c5 in the future, and in order to stop that, black's going to want to play something like b6, but that's awkward to play because of the bishop on g2. So it's kind of a bit confusing. If black could, he'd want to like trade off the queens via queen d5 or something, but of course then knight f6 check would lose it to the bishop, so wouldn't be great.
Wouldn't be great, no. So c6 is just blocking the bishop's diagonal, just blunting it somewhat.
Yeah.
Also, I guess, giving the queen another route, but not really so important at this stage.
Yeah, it helps to put something on d5 later on, like either the bishop or the knight. Yeah, just something else supporting. I'd expect something like bishop b4 or something, exploiting that diagonal, but then maybe just rook e8 and like bishop e6 pushing the queen away. It's not so obvious that white gets anything there, so I'm not completely sure what... Okay, yeah. I have seen this game before, but I can't particularly remember it because I just saw it very briefly after the game.
Yeah, well, this was one of the lines. Another possibility was queen c1 here.
Queen c1 to attack h6.
Attack h6 and just give make f7 that little bit weaker. Because you said he wants to go to h7 anyway, so probably this is why he played bishop b4, because he doesn't want to give him that free tempo, as it were.
Okay.
But when I watched this game live, they were all talking about queen c1.
Interesting.
So anyway, we should carry on the game, probably because of this move, bishop e6 now comes with tempo on the queen. Yeah, where's he going to move it to?
So it'll be interesting to see, because I mean c2 is the natural square, but I'm kind of thinking c1 at the moment, just basically based on what you said last time, because you can do the same thing again. Although in that case, I would assume that playing at the previous move, like you suggested, was better, because then we get that attack on h6, because we've just moved the bishop out of the way, obviously. But okay, so he does play that. So that's kind of confusing for me, because it's like a mix of plans. If he was going to play this anyway, because he liked that attack on h6, he shouldn't have moved the bishop already. So it could be the case that he just hasn't really decided on what plan he's going for. Or it could be the case that he just thought the queen was better placed there and he wanted to wait until bishop e6 was played before moving it. And maybe that's not with the intention to take on h6 or anything, it's just to play something like queen f4, where the bishop wouldn't be in the way on d2. And queen f4 is quite a nice square because it allows his rooks to get to the c-file, and it puts more pressure on d6 basically. Of course you can play it immediately because of knight d5, but something like that.
Yep. Okay. So bishop d5 next. Now he's got his bishop nicely into middle, nice central location.
Yeah.
Prime real estate.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to decide between the knight and the bishop. I guess the bishop is... Well, obviously you can play the bishop immediately because it's not pinned like the knight is, but it's probably better to do the bishop like he has done, because he just wants to permanently oppose that g2 one and have the potential to trade it off whenever it moves. The knight on e7 isn't the best piece, but at the same time, it's you know, it's not an urgent thing to have to move it. I guess queen f4 here, but it's not so obvious to me what the best plan for Magnus is. Maybe just queen f4 and then queen d6 or something like that, but then again it's encouraging trades, so it's kind of awkward.
I guess it depends really on what he wants to do. Does he want to win the game? Does he want to hang on? I guess it's still quite early stages, so he's still keeping everything open.
It is, yeah, but at the same time I definitely think Vishy isn't really any worse based on this opening. So I'd say the opening was pretty much a success from him again.
A4 here is quite strange considering his previous two moves, perhaps.
Well, I guess you can argue that queen c1 was somewhat forced via the bishop move. I mean, a4 is kind of with the plan of, I mean, I guess a5, a6, but yeah, to me, if you're doing that plan, it makes more sense to have the queen on c2, because you don't allow bishop b3 at any point, and also you've got the c1 square open for like the f rook. Maybe he wants to play it with queen f4 first, which is fine, but then I don't understand why you wouldn't play queen f4 first and be, you know, more committed along that line, because you don't have to rush on this a4 move. And I don't know, it feels like he's well, I don't know, he's a much better player than me, so
Let's see how Vishy handles it. So he plays b6, stopping that a5 move, although leaving the c pawn slightly weakened, but it is defended twice, so
yeah, exactly.
It will survive for now.
I think given that he's got the bishop on d5, it's less of an issue, because that diagonal is opposed. A lot of the problems black has with the c6 pawn are because of the bishop on g2 and not being able to find a good spot for our own pieces around it. Now that we've got something in front of it, I think he's pretty happy, because also he's going to be able to play c5 at a later point, and that'll block out the bishop, it'll solve any pawns being on the c-file, and he's still going to have his bishop on d5, so it's looking fine. Magnus isn't any worse, but he's I don't think he's got any opening edge at all.
So here he gives up his bishop pair.
Huh. Interesting.
Definitely one comment. Why did he do that? Who knows?
I mean, I don't think the knight was very good on e7. It helped protect a bit. By trading it, basically what Carlsen's doing is saying that I think that knight is going to be better than my bishop, which admittedly black's going to play c5 at some point. So the question is whether he could have done anything more with that bishop, like brought it back to d2 to like h6 after king h7. Where can he really put it? Maybe his argument is he can't really put it anywhere good, and it would block his queen in more. So I get, when you have less space in general, it's generally a good idea to trade things, but it doesn't have that much less space, and giving away the two bishops in a position like this, although it's, you know, it's going to be fine. It's I don't know. I'd always try and keep them on, really, unless I thought I was in a position where I thought I had to do something with them. But okay.
Okay, so we're going to have to speed through this a little bit because I have places to be.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay. So we'll speed this up a bit. So I think after queen takes e7, which was obvious, probably queen f4. Otherwise I don't understand his real plan with it. Maybe you could play queen d2 and b4, then put the rooks on c1, but we'll see.
You've got the controls as well.
Okay. Okay, so a5 was played. That's consistent with the a4 plan.
Yep.
I would imagine that black just ignores it, because if you take on a5, your pawn structure is weakened. If you play b5, you've got a hole on c5. So I just ignore it and keep developing normally. Okay, so rook b8 is maybe with the intention of taking on a5 and attacking on the b2 file, which is fine. a7 and c6 will be weak, but b2 is more weak. You can argue that c6 is fine potentially later on, because it's still got the d4 pawn to support, so it's not an Isolani, but yeah, okay. So rook e1 is played to protect e2 after any knight move. Rook c8 makes sense. And now Magnus trades. So here we get to see the difference, basically. If he takes with the a pawn, it's more solid. Magnus has opened up his a1 rook, which is good for him, but he'll have the worst pawn structure because he's got an isolated pawn on b2. If Vishy takes with the rook, then his plan's going to revolve around doubling the rooks and playing queen b7, putting a lot of pressure on b2. And although the pawn structure is more even, if you like, because they've both got an Isolani on b2 and a7, it's definitely the more aggressive way to go, and I don't think it's really any worse. So it's kind of deciding what type of game that Vishy wants to play. So okay, he took with the pawn. Queen f4 now. You could play like bishop e5 here and just push the queen away. Oh, but then maybe he takes on h6, so ignore that. Rook d8, stopping anything going to d6. Just say if you've got any comments or anything.
Yep, I will do.
h4. So I guess the idea of that is just to stop any g5 move. Potentially you could get in trouble after g5 because the queen doesn't have many squares with like bishop e5, bishop e6 or something. King h7, knight d2.
So
Okay.
here we got an example of what the fans were dreading when a possibility of perpetual. If
Yeah, I guess.
Vishy wanted it with bishop e6 and d5. Just depending where the queen goes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that Magnus kind of walked himself into it though by playing knight d2 because he's blocking off squares from his queen. So it's kind of interesting. It's queen g4, h5.
This is the more aggressive way.
Yeah, because I guess here he could play bishop e6, and that would be the kind of perpetual line.
Yeah.
But I definitely take this position as black, I think. I don't think Magnus is much worse, but his queen here is going to be pushed to some weird square. So h3, bishop e6, and queen
And it's
h5.
going all the way back next to her king.
Yeah. So, I mean, having the queen on a8 in many positions as black, like if you have some modern position or something similar to that, like some hedgehog or something, it's a somewhat common idea. But then you've got a lot of tension in the middle, you haven't really got many pawn breaks and things. Here you've got an open A file and you've got half open C file, so it's...
Okay. I'm afraid I have to sign off at this point. Unfortunately.
Okay.
But I'll rejoin you, because this bit, the end game here, gets a little complicated. So I'll leave you in the more than capable hands of Carl.
Okay.
But you have to make it exciting and entertaining for our 3 subscribers.
Nice. Okay.
Alright, sorry about that.
Okay.
But we got lots of other games, so you'll see more of me later.
Okay. Bye.
Alright. Bye for now.
Okay, we've been deserted. Debatable quality over this, but we're going to continue because we're halfway through. So queen h1, the general idea is just to put more pressure along this, h1 to a8 diagonal. And obviously it's a much better square than h2, because there the queen would have no potential of getting out. Here we're kind of having some justification that we're going to move this bishop later on, and then we're going to put our queen somewhere else, maybe f3, maybe e4, just somewhere where it's more in the game. Black has a lot more space, but he can't potentially... utilize it so quickly. If he had a quick break on, it would be problematic, but if we have a position like this, I'd say it's more in the vein of some kind of half hedgehog or something like that, whereby it doesn't particularly matter if your queen is over here, as long as it's still doing something and isn't completely out of play. So c6 hangs at the moment. You could play something like queen b4 first, hitting the knight and attacking the b2 pawn, but then I think if white just takes on c6, you'd be able to play, his queen out next move, so... Well, I guess queen b4, then he could just take the knight, so he needs to do something about the knight first, but then maybe knight e4 or something. If you take on b2, you're getting in some awkward spaces after, knight g5 check, and then take on c6. So material is even. This passed pawn on b6 is isolated, so I don't think that's much for black. So I'd imagine you just play something like c5, and goes for some, plan with a slower push of these pawns. Be what I do anyway. Okay, I totally skipped a ton there. So c5 was played. Knight e4 was played. Yeah, so he's probably intending this knight g5 in order to trade off this bishop. If he manages to trade his knight for that bishop, he's going to get a lot of endings whereby they have opposite colours, so even if he loses a pawn, it will be salvageable. Because it's very hard to win opposite colour bishop endgames. King g7, knight g5, b5 is played. Vishy doesn't mind the trade, he'll take back with the queen and then that'll help push through this c4 push. e3, e3, okay. So the thing with e3 is, as I mentioned earlier, it makes d3 very weak. So if we take, which seems like the obvious move, which is what he did, because we know that because I skipped forward, we're now in a position where d3 hangs and b2 hangs. So if we play... Well, I mean, I think rook takes is pretty much the only move which is played, because obviously f takes, you can take some d3, and b2 still hangs. So after this, the question is, what do we do? Taking on b2 seems obvious, but at the same time, having seen the game, I know that he plays bishop d4, as we can see here. So the justification for not taking on b2 must be something to do with it gets complicated later on. And my best guess would be that after bishop takes b2, just the move rook to e1, rook a to e1, means that after something like bishop d4, we're going to be able to have this sack rook takes on e6, and after the pawn takes, we're going to be able to have knight takes, king moves, and then we take this. So we'd be losing a pawn on b2, we'd be gaining this f7 pawn after it moves to e6, and although we've sacked this rook for this bishop, we're getting it back on d8 immediately, and that would be Carlsen's kind of line that he's thinking about. So he must have had that as a justification when he was playing this e3, and that's how he thought he was going to take advantage of that. Alternatively, instead of just immediately taking on e6, you can kind of gang up on it with bishop h3 or something, but I don't think that's as good because of the bishop d4 back basically can just take on e3. So yeah, bishop d4 is played instead, which is safer, but I think the general consensus after was that, taking on b2 we'd have really good chances to win, although those complications would actually favour black a bit. I would agree with that assessment, just because we're losing this b2 pawn, and we're going to be able to push in this c4 move, which is going to give us a pass pawn on the c file after takes. So, our pass pawn supported by two bishops is good. It'll go down to one bishop and one rook, but I think black definitely would have chances. Magnus would be lying in the opposite colour bishop endgame with less material on the board. So rook e2 is played, supports d2, b2. Now c4 is played. Knight takes e6, which kind of splits the pawn structure of black a bit, so that's like a useful move from white's point of view, and obviously as it's check, black has to deal with that first before he can deal with anything on d3. So bishop e4 is played. The idea of this is to get the queen into play, obviously, put the bishop on a better square. He's defending d3. You can kind of have some tricks here with after takes d3, takes d3. Then something like bishop takes f2, rook takes f2, rook takes d3. So we're up a pawn there. But I think this queen can come into play quite easily on like queen e4 or something. And then you're hitting the rook here, you're hitting the pawn here. I think with rook a6 or something, you're gonna gang up on this pawn, probably gain it back. Even if we don't, it's gonna be hard to win that rook endgame with queens on. And it seems better than just taking on c4, because after the recapture, b2 has extra pressure on it, and obviously our bishop would be back on g2. Our queen is really outside the game still, and it's awkward to deal with, because even if we try to get in via something like queen h3, attacking the c6, you could just push e5, then this bishop supporting it would mean that the queen actually has no squares that you can come to along this diagonal to get back into the game. So he does take on d3, and now rook d2 is played. So I guess actually those complications I was talking about before with takes on f2, where he wins that pawn, Magnus wants to avoid them. This move I actually didn't see, so it makes a lot of sense, because by keeping the f2 pawn, we are having more protection around our king, and if we can take back on d3 and not lose f2, obviously we're even material-wise, so it's probably a good plan. We can aim to capture this d3 later with something like queen f3, because there's no real way to support this pawn from black's point of view, in a way that black could, sustain it for the full game, because ultimately this pawn's always going to live on d3, which is a white square, and when you put all the pieces attacking it, black is a dark square bishop, so he can't hit this, whereas this one does. So that was better played by Magnus than I thought, than my move, sorry. So he only has 6 minutes left though on the 33rd move, so he has to move pretty quickly. It's about a minute a move. Queen b4 is played, so that attacks the rook immediately, double attacks the b2 pawn. So the question is whether we play rook a d1, supporting this rook, allowing b2 to go down to the bishop, and then taking on d3, or whether we take on, let's say, d3 immediately, with the rook. Then I feel like we can get in trouble with queen takes b2, which double attacks this and this, because it forces rook f1, and then this b pawn is not a lot of defense against this. We could kind of walk it up, so I'd just expect rook a d1, which is played. Takes b2, now queen f3. So again, he's not rushing on the capture of this, which is probably wise. Getting his queen back into the game. Bishop f6, I just probably take on d3 now, yep. Trades. And bishop d3. I guess the idea here is just to open up for queen b7 check, and then obviously we win back b5. I don't think there's really anything that black can do to stop that. So it does seem to be that those trades, and this plan with rook d2, instead of immediately taking back on d3, was really good actually. Because I don't really think that there's a way that Vishy could have avoided that. And there's no real way to stop this check while still supporting this pawn. So I think we're just going to end up in a drawn endgame, because it's going to be even material. I mean, this isn't the perfect pawn structure compared to this, but with the queens on, there's going to be no way for white to progress, and with the queens off, it would be even worse, because we just have the opposite coloured bishops. There's no way to win that. So queen d4, he just takes on b5. Queen f6. Well, I mean, he's checking now, but he could just trade queens and it would be a draw. There's no real way to win this, because you can just block with the bishop on the dark squares, so yeah. Vishy's doing the right thing, just trade off the pawns, it just forces a draw quicker. c4, he's just pushing here. He could give this pawn, it makes no difference. This is played instead. Now the queens are traded, now it's... Ooh. Yeah, so retook back with the queen, which forces the queen trade. And now... well, they're just messing around here, I guess, but it's definitely a draw. And yeah, the pawns are traded and it's a draw. Okay, so that was a much more fighting game. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Sorry about the bit of issues. We've really had to try and squeeze this in. Fusion's a kind of, well, I say kind of, he's doing his PhD in astrophysics at the moment, so it's, you know, he doesn't have much time. And I'm at work, so, you know, it's awkward to find time, but hopefully we get this out now. We'll get out game 4 tonight, because game 5 is tomorrow, and then he is going back home, I think this weekend, so maybe game 5 and game 6 again will be a little delayed, but after that we'll be all good, because we'll be able to do it on the day soon after, and I'd hope for much faster kind of uploads. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and see you guys next time.